Hello, my name is Johannes Kazia. I'm a visual effects artist at Starbreeze, and I decided to make a tutorial for this FumeFX grenade effect. I'm going to be showing you something along the lines of this. Fairly simple fume simulation built into a flipbook and then imported into Unreal. So before I get started and in depth a bit too much, I recommend you all take a look at the videos on my page to do with FumeFX. It will definitely help you save time. Just for an example, you can see all the settings that FumeFX has and what they look like, and it saves you from spending 6 hours rendering it yourself. Okay, so we're here in 3ds Max. You're going to start off by going to the create panel. You're going to go to this little drop down menu, down to FumeFX. That's if you have it installed. I'm going to assume you do. Once you have that selected, you can click on here, and this allows you to draw a nice little box. What this box is it basically resembles the amount of voxels that you have. Voxels are like 3D pixels. Each voxel contains data of, it could be anything like velocity, density, or anything like that. So you can kind of see here, this little cube down here, that's one voxel, or a representative of 10 voxels, depending on your size that you have here on the right. So the more voxels you have, the higher your resolution is going to be, the more detail it's going to be, but the longer it's going to take to simulate and render. So once you've drawn this box out, you can say the width and the height here. It's fairly plain and simple, quite easy to read. I recommend making something nice and high like this, because what we're going to do is we're going to start off with the vertical explosion. So a nice high one will be quite good. So now that you have this box, we need to tell this box to render out some particles or render out our source. In this case, it's going to be particles. So you want to go to the Create tab once again, and then this drop-down menu, and bring out particle systems. You want PF source. Forget about these for now. This is like the most simple one that you can get. Let's take a look. Okay, so once you have this down, you can go into the edit tab, particle view, and this will open up a nice little window for you. This is basically, it's kind of like a node system, or a timeline. Like this is the source, and then here you have the events, which controls the birth, the position, the speed, blah blah blah. For now, we're just going to get rid of the shape because we're not going to have, it's not 3D. We're just going to have a point in space. The rotation as well, because it's not 3D, we don't need that. We're going to start off with a birth of, because it's an explosion, it's going to be quite a lot. So I'm going to go with 2000, and this is the start and stop time. So how long the emitter will be playing for. So it's going to, explosions happen really quick. So this is going to be like 2 frames. Might have to put it even lower. We'll see. The position, let's see now, let's move this out the way. Okay, so if I play this now, you'll see I get this huge burst of particles going straight down. We want them to go up, not down, and we want them to all come from one point. If we have them in a box like this, it doesn't really make sense. If you like throw a grenade, it's all going to come from one point, you know, the explosion. So we're going to take this, and then we're going to go to pivot. Now you can see that this is all coming from the center. And then I think that's everything we need from that. And then from the speed, these are going to go really quick. So let's see how quick this is in real time. Yep, that's pretty quick. Let's bump it up a little bit more though, say 6000. Get some variation in there. It's always good to put in variation, even if it's a tiny bit of a variation. It just helps with the final look. So we'll say 1000. And then we'll click reverse. This will, so you can see this arrow down here. That means that the particles will go, the particles are going to go down. But if you click reverse, they should now be going up, which they are. And you want a divergence. What this does is it should spread the particles out because explosions don't look like this, right? Because that would be really dumb. It should spread them out like this. Lovely, I know. So it's up to you as to what kind of look you want to go for. If you want to look for a really uniform explosion which goes straight up, this will be something for like if a mortar hits the ground or something like that. Something that has a lot of velocity, the explosion will go straight up. But as it's a grenade that we're going to go for, we're going to want something that sort of goes in almost all the angles. Something like this will do just fine. Don't worry about display. I don't think we need to do anything. Okay, so now let's make this a bit smaller. See how this looks now. All right. Now they're living for a bit too long, so we need to kill them. So down here, these are like all your tools that you get. What we need is a delete. So we're going to take this delete, drag it in. When you drag it in, make sure you see this little blue line that goes in between the other settings. That means it will drop in just nicely. So now you want to say you want to delete by age, and you want to give it a really short lifespan of 2 with a variation of 1. So this means it will be alive for 2 frames of your animation, I think, or 2 seconds. No, 2 frames. And then the variation is a variation of 1 frame. So that means that the maximum life of a particle can be 3 frames, and then the minimum life of a particle can be 1 frame. This should give us a nice exploding look. And there you go, that is the start of the explosion. Nice and simple. Okay, so now we're done with the particle system. We can close out of here. And now we need to tell this box to render this particle system. The way that we do that is by selecting it, click on this option right here, and then first of all, what you first need to do is, in general, you need to assign your output path for your cache files. If you don't know what cache files are, it's basically temporary memory saved onto your computer to do with your simulation. These can get pretty hefty. They will clog up your computer very quick. So make sure you save them in a place where you have some space. And to do so, you click on this little folder. This opens up another window and you can save them wherever you please. But once you've done that, then you can start adding in objects that you want to render. So I have this particle system here, but first I need to add in a helper. So I do this by going to the create menu, click on this little logo here, it's helpers. And then in this drop down menu, you go down to FumeFX, and then there's a few ones in here that you need to pay attention to. The main ones are simple source and particle source and object source. I won't go into depth as to what these do at the moment, but a quick overview is object source is basically you select some geometry and you can set that on fire essentially. A simple source is just a sphere, a point in space, and then particle source, you've guessed it, it's from particles. So you click on that, drag one of these in, doesn't matter where you put it, you can put it wherever you want, it doesn't have to be inside the box, it can be outside. Once you have this, you must then, hang on, let me see now. So once this is selected, there you go. So once this is selected, you can click on this, pick object here, and then select the particle system, and then just choose the top one. And that will do just great. So now this source is connected to this particle system, but now you need to connect this box to this source. It is a bit weird and complicated, but that's just how it's done. So let me show you quick. So make sure this is selected, this box, come over to this icon, open up this window, and under object and source you want to go to pick object, and now you can pick this object. You cannot select the particle system, I don't know why, but you just can't. You have to select this. So with that selected, you can now see it here in your window, and If you add more, you can do. They will all just pop up in here. Now that this is selected, if you scroll down, you have all the settings in here of what your particles are and what size they should be, and if they should be rendering out as smoke or temperature or whatever it is you are doing. In our case, we are just going to do the smoke. So to save on cache memory, what we're going to do is we're going to disable fuel by clicking on this, and channel is disabled. We want to disable temperature, and I think oxygen we might need, but we'll just leave it as now just in case. But we're just going to do smoke for now. So make sure this is to set, and that should be fine. And now we are ready to simulate, I believe. So let's give it a go. So this little window up here is a little preview window. You can open it up and have a look at what your simulation will look like almost in real time. And then to start your simulation, you press this little doodad, and away it goes. As you see, it's going to be doing a whole lot of magic. This is basically the cache memory that I was talking about. This is now saving onto that hard drive that I mentioned on earlier, and this is the memory that's being used, etc, etc. It's nice little information about your simulation. So once it's done, that one didn't take too long because it's a very low quality render, as you can see. I mean, it doesn't look like anything, it just looks like a smudgy blur, but we're getting there. So we can actually press play now and have a look at this, and actually we can rewind it, which is quite nice. If you want to see frame by frame as to how it looks and maybe what you can improve, where it's going wrong, you can do that. And have a little rotation around. So that's that. We now have a simulation, so now we need to go into the settings and play around with the overall look. So now that we have our first simulation done, it is time to tweak the settings and make it look a bit better than what it is. So if you come into the simulation tab, you'll see all the settings to do with it, stuff like gravity, vorticity, etc, etc. So the best thing to do is to compare what we have to something that is real, something that is already existing. And if it looks wrong, then it's probably because it is wrong, right? So if we watch this go up, it's going up way too high. This is not what I expect from a grenade explosion. So to stop it from traveling so high, we need to dampen the velocity. To do that, we're going to go up. Here we have system. Under velocity dampening, we're going to put this to something like 2. Or, well, I think 1 is the max, so maybe 0.2. And then we're also going to add some detail into the smoke. To do so, we're going to need to take this up to 5. And then we are going to then turn the scale. This is like this is going to add this is going to sound a bit weird. It's like the bumps and the curves in the smoke on the surface of the smoke. So you can have like cigarette smoke is quite smooth and streaky. So you'd turn this to 1, and then you turn the scale right up. But because this is, I'm assuming it's going to be mostly dust, you're going to need this detail right up and scale real big. So we're going to set the scale to about 200. Actually more than that, sorry. Sorry, less, 100. So scale 100, detail 5, the dampening in the velocity, and now we'll see how this goes. Hopefully it's a bit better. Okay, it looks like we're getting there. It's more than is what we want. We've definitely gotten rid of this weird ass tower thing, but it's dampened way too much. So I'm gonna go back and go to the dampening, turn to maybe 0.5, back. And also what I'm going to do is, you can see the size of these particles down here. So these circles is basically this circle here is going to be emitting smoke, this circle here is going to be emitting smoke, and if they're together, the smoke will merge. So what we can do is go to object source. This edits the parameters of the particle system. So we're going to turn the radius up, right up, so that some of these overlap with each other, and that will definitely help with the smoke conforming together. Back to simulation, try and simulate again. Now it's a much better look. So this is basically what simulation is, right? It's a lot of punching in random numbers that you don't really know what it will look like, and then hoping it looks good. It's a lot of tweaking, going back and forth, and not being happy with what you have and being frustrated. It's a lot of playing around with numbers. So if you don't get it right, don't worry about it. You just got to keep on trying, trial and error essentially. But this is looking good, apart from this weird like glitchy line that's going on here. So what's going on here is, as you can see, there's like a sharp line here on the right, and then it's yeah, so here on the sharp line. So what this means is that the particles are intersecting with this box, and because it's going outside of the box, that means it's no longer rendering. So there's a few ways that we can fix this. First of all, I mean, we could put this in the middle to start off with, and then we can make this a bit bigger. To make this bigger, just head over to general, add the width, make it like what's that, 1800. Let's make it a box, so 1800 on the width and length. And then I also think it's clipping. If you're not too sure, you can see here now there's 3 boxes. This one here, this is how big your simulation actually is. This one here was the previous size of our last simulation. So you can see that the blue has come to the edges of this box, and that means that the smoke is now clipping with the edges. So making this box a bit bigger will definitely help with that. Let's just play around with some settings. I think we should probably make this a bit bigger, maybe 2000. Okay, let's see now. Let's simulate. Let's get this window up so we kind of know what we're looking at. Not entirely sure what this line is. This is just FumeFX, because FumeFX is a plugin. It doesn't always have expected results. You're gonna come across bugs and glitches. But this should iron out when we ramp up the resolution of this. But I'm pretty happy with how this is looking so far. What I am gonna do is I'm just gonna take a look through these settings a bit more, keep playing, tweaking. I'm gonna go back to my channel and have a look at the different settings until I find something that I like. So I'll be right back. Okay, so now I've got a rough look of what I want. It's not exactly what I want, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it for the purpose of this tutorial. All I basically want is this smoke going up in a vertical direction, but not too much. These particles are going out a bit too more than what I would like, but it'll do for now. So basically what I did to get to this is a few simple things. I played around with the turbulence. The turbulence is how much the smoke will spread, essentially, and that adds it to the X, Y, and Z directions. I also went here into the dissipation strength, turn that up a little bit. One of the main things I did was in object source you can almost keyframe the size of your particles. So basically it's like a size over life sort of thing. So at the beginning of their life they're quite big, and then as they go on they get smaller, and that definitely helped with the overall look. But I think what I want to do is I actually want to kill off some of these particles a bit sooner than what they are at the moment. So I'll go into here, and then I it might increase because I'm killing them off. That means there's going to be less smoke. I'm going to up these to 3000, and then to delete I'm going to drop this down to 1 with a variation of 2. Okay, so we'll see how this looks. Render it out. I think that's a bit better. It's more the sort of silhouette that I want. But again, I'm not going to spend too much time, because you'll see now that when you up the resolution of this, it's going to change completely almost. So I'll get back to you when I do that. So this render is done, but it's not the detail I want. I mean, if you put this into a game, people are just gonna laugh at you. So if you go into the general tab, the spacing here is essentially the resolution of your voxels. So the lower the spacing, the more voxels you're gonna have, the more detail you're gonna have. But be aware, this is gonna take a lot longer to render. It's gonna eat up on your render times the lower you put it. So down here you can see the simulation, and the render is an estimate of how much memory this is going to take. So if you see, if I lower it down, these numbers are going to get a lot higher. Depending on your workstation, you just want to be careful what you put it to. So I'm going to put it to 1000 for now, and then do a quick render and then see what it looks like, and then I'm going to bump it up even more. Okay, and we're back. That render took about 8 minutes, which isn't too long actually, and you can now see that there is a lot more detail in here. You can see it looks quite dusty as well, which is pretty much what we want. I'm just going to explain to you quickly the reason why it looks dusty. I went over it before, but just to be clear, this is the reason why. So if you don't want something that looks dusty, you want something more smooth, this is where you want to look at. So again, it's because I upped the detail, and it's also because of the scale is super high. So that's what gives it this dusty look. That's what we want. So now that we have this, this still isn't the resolution I want, because it needs to be even higher, but for now it will do. We now need to add in some lights. So what we're going to do is we're going to close this out. We don't need it anymore. Don't worry, it is still there, it won't delete itself. We're going to go into lights. We don't want photometric because they're hella expensive. We want a target spotlight. And then you should be able to drag this out just like that. Pull it up. And there you go. You're lighting your effect, easy peasy. But there are a few settings that you need to look at, and they're very important that you don't forget them. This is going to be under here, under your general parameters. You want to make sure that shadows are on. You want to put ray traced shadows. I haven't done this in a while, so let me see if I can remember. The color you can play around with, but because it's for a game, you kind of want a neutral color, because in a game sometimes the exposure might go off indoors or outdoors, in a rainy situation or in a sunny situation. So you want to be able to light this in engine. So don't worry about this too much. I think this is fine. You can, if you want to be all artsy, you can put in maybe a yellow light for that to replicate the sun, and then put in another spotlight on the other side as blue to represent the sky. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to keep it white. These are all fine. Advanced settings, these are fine. Shadow parameters here. So you want to make sure atmospheric shadows are on. I believe that is the only other one. Yep. Let me just make sure. Yeah, okay. So make sure atmospheric shadows are on right here. Leave this as it is. And you can do the color, you can do the intensity, but we're not going to do that today. And also very important, make sure that ray trace shadows are on. and that should be okay. But we don't just want one spotlight, we want to have at least 3. I'm going to go for the standard setup that I normally go for. This will light it in not all directions, but if you light it in 3 directions, then you'll have enough shadow and contrast in your look. It's also good to have one pointing down like this. There you go. So this is like, you can imagine this being the sun. This is the light from the sky. And then this one is just a little tiny bit of light that maybe you can set to 0.5. This one will be the highest at 1. And then this one will be 0.8. So, and then that is something that should look quite nice. Let's have a look. So again, open this up, head over to the illumination parameters, and again, just like the way we selected our particle system here, we want to go and click this little hand here to pick light, select the light, and do it with the other 2. And you can see now they're in here. That means that they're all selected, 1, 2, and 3. Shadows, you can play around with these. This is more like for post-production sort of stuff. But for now, they should be fine. There is this selection here, the multiple scattering, which is a very important setting if you're trying to do fire. This basically means that if you have fire and smoke in the same scene, and you want the fire to light up the smoke, then you put in multiple scattering. That will basically turn your fire into a light. But we're not doing fire today, so we're just going to leave that as is. And now we're going to render it out again. Or maybe we can even see it in here. So a little tip with this preview window, you can open it up here, and here's the quality. So you can set these higher or lower depending on your preference. You can turn on shadows and multiple scattering, etc, etc. So this is looking good. I'm gonna up the resolution and then render it out again, and then we're pretty much done for the simulation part. Okay, I just did another small improvement on the simulation side, decreasing the spacing, sorry. But I realized I forgot to mention that you need to come over to the rendering tab, and in order to actually see the lights in action, you need to tell it to render the lights, the casting shadows and receiving shadows. There you go. It's a small improvement. So now that we have what we want, essentially, it's time to get a camera and record it. So to do that, we come out to the Create tab, get ourselves a camera. You want to get a target camera or a free camera, depends on your personal preference. So I'm going to just place this camera here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Alt W to come into the 4-page view. And here I'm going to right click, or is it left click now? Left click, go to cameras and see this camera. So now I can see what this camera is seeing. It just helps a bit better to place it where it needs to be. I'm going to place this a bit forward. Okay. Now to see if that is in frame, you right click the camera frame, open this up. Sorry, right click it now and then open this up. There you go. So you can see this is at frame 100 and it is in frame. Now we've run into a problem that I probably should have done at the start, is that we need to compress this into a 64 framed flipbook, not 100 frame, because 100 frame, well, I guess it could work in Flipbook, but it won't be ideal. So you right click here on the play button, you bring the frame count down to 64, and yeah, okay. And now this is the last frame of your simulation. This is what it's going to look like. If I press play, it's super laggy because it's got a crazy amount of detail in now. Well, not crazy, but good enough. good enough for now. It's very white, very white, so that means that our lights are a bit too intense. Let's see now, let's see what we can do about that. Where is this? Where am I? There you go, it just wasn't scrolling down properly. Okay, so to see it in the view box, you have to have this selected here, the shadows. Now I'll bring out the shadows. So it's emitting way too much light, so we need to do that. Come in here, select this, bring this down to 0.2, bring this down to 0.3, and bring this, this is supposed to be the sun, right? So 0.5, it's going to be the highest. The reason for this is that lights are additive, which means that the more lights you put in, the brighter and brighter and brighter it's going to get. So if a value of, if the value goes over 1, it's gonna be too much, and you're gonna lose a lot of detail. And what I mean by a value of 1 is I mean this multiplier. So this is 0.5, this is 0.3, this is 0.2. So 0.5, 0.3, that is a total of 0.8. This adds 0.2, which is now a total of 1. So in theory, this should look a bit better now. There you go. A lot nicer. We can actually see what's going on, which is good. I am going to move the camera up a little. I'm just going to move this out the way. Just going to move this up too, and then I'm going to bring this back into view, see where we are. That's a bit better. We want to make sure that we are very efficient with our resolution. We want to make sure that this explosion, the last frame of this explosion, encompasses the entire frame as much as we can. That is for performance issues due to stuff like overdraw and whatnot in the game. If you're not too sure about all that stuff, don't worry about it too much, but it's definitely something you need to look into in your own time. So a bit more tweaking, moving it closer and closer. This needs to go down. It's a bit of a pain in the ass to move this stuff. There probably is a better way. I can't remember because I haven't used 3ds Max in such a long time. So this target needs to come down, like so. I think there is a way. If you select this box here, and then on the right you can go viewport. Let's see now. What if we do this? There we go. So we can actually see. So we can actually get rid of this now. But it's you got to be careful now because this is going to slow down your computer because now it's trying to draw the smoke in your viewport. So I think if we up this, there we go. It should be a bit better. So let's put it at 0.3, and let's get this out the way. Actually, yeah, we don't need this. It's really slow now. My computer's not the best, so maybe it's best we don't have this on. But you can do that if your computer can handle it. Then yeah, go ahead. But yeah. So let's take a look. Where are we? I just moved that by accident. There you go. Move all this stuff out of the way. You can clutter your screen very easily. Okay, so the target on the camera needs to come up a little bit, and then let's see. Okay, that's looking good to me. That's pretty much covering up a lot of the frame. If this was in the production pipeline, I'd probably spend a lot more time on doing it, but I'm going to show you a nice little trick at the very end, so you don't have to worry too much about all this fidgeting. But now you can see this this frame here, it says 63, but it's not, because it also counts frame 0. So frame 0 to 53 is 64 frames. So don't worry about this. This is 64 frames. But you can see now if I scroll this back, There you go. It's all in the same frame, and it's just how we want it. Lovely. Right, so our camera is in place, our lights are in place, and the smoke's ready to render out. Okay, so the best rendering settings to use will be in here, this little teapot with a little gear sign. These settings, so there's a few things that you need to make sure that you have. A lot of this you can skip, but the main things that you want is that you want to set this to range. So you want to render from frame 0 to frame 63. So let's do that. 63. Area to render, we want to just keep it in view. Output size, we're going to put this to a custom output size of 512 by 512. And the reason for that is if you have 64 frames and each frame is 512 by 512, you're going to end up with a texture resolution of 4096. So it's a 4K texture, and that's pretty much, this is probably the max that you want to go in a production company. Any higher than that, then you're really going to have to justify why. It's a lot of detail, but hopefully in the future we can get some nice graphics cards out and we can bump these up without having to worry. But for now, 512 by 512 will do. Frame range from 0 to 63. We also need to make sure that it renders the camera. So up here, view to render, we want to say we want to Alt W on here, right click on this, and there you go, it has selected the camera. So you see, if I right click here, it says perspective, right here it says camera. So make sure that is selected, otherwise you end up rendering the wrong view. So I think skyline render is fine for now. Target, this is all fine. Later on you can come into here in your own time and have a look at what's best for you, but for now we're going to leave it as it is. Here, this is where we're going to save the file. So if we find a nice place to save it, we're going to go to the E drive, and we're going to go to, just going to create a new folder here. I'm going to call this FumeFX smoke render. Excuse my crazy capitals, yeah, whatever. That'll do. Open that up, save it here. Now this is quite important, you need to make sure that you save these as a, I think a TGA. TGAs will do, file name, FumeFX, smoke, whatever, smoke underscore 01, and press save. Don't worry about this. Well, I guess you should. 32 means that is the 32 bits per pixel. That means that it's also going to render not only the red, green, and blue channels, but it's also going to render the alpha channel. This is important if you do want color in your renders. If you don't have color, then you don't need to worry too much. If you're just rendering the smoke as it is, as black and white, then you can have it on 24, but for now I'm just going to leave this on 32. We can have it on 24, it won't matter, but 32 is what I'm going to go for. Hit OK, and then that should be ready to go. So I'm going to press render, and then I'm going to come back when it's done. Okay, my render is done. Now we have this little window that shows you a frame. This should be my last frame. So earlier on when I was talking about the bits, this is what I was meaning. The red, green, and blue channel, they're quite important when it comes to video games. Basically, you want to try and have as much data as you can in one texture. So you can have, so for instance, the alpha channel, which is this one right here. If you have this on, this is what the alpha channel is. A alpha channel is just a value from 0 to 1. I mean, all of these they're all a value of 0 to 1. But blue, this is how much blue data there is, green data and red data, and all of them combined gives you this. So what you can do if you want to get more in depth, what you can do is you can have the alpha channel to be your density, and then in your blue channel you can have your emissiveness, your temperature. That will look slightly different to this. It basically tells the engine that this is where the heat is. This is where the flames are, etc., etc. But yeah, so I'm not going to go into that. Maybe another day. Okay, so I got this render. Time to turn it into a flipbook. So to do that, I'm going to go into Photoshop, File, Scripts. I'm going to load files into Stack. Browse for the files. I saved them under my hard drive. Look for the TGAs that we saved them as. And I think you should select them all. Press OK. Wait for them to load in. Hit OK. Now what this should do is it will put every single one of these images on top of each other in the same in the same Photoshop file. As you can see, they're coming in here now. And you can see it getting a little bit smaller. There you go. So there you go. This is frame 0, frame 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so on and so on. But I mean, this is great. We all have it in the same place, but we need it in a flipbook. So I'll explain to you what a flipbook is in a minute if you don't know, but just bear with me. We're going to do this first. So we're going to go to scripts, and then I'm going to use this called the sprite sheet generator. This is super handy, and the guy who made it is an absolute genius. I'll put a link in the description to this sprite sheet generator. It is free to use. I highly recommend getting it. Basically, so because each one of these images is a 512 by 512, we're going to need to, and there's 64 images, that means it's going to be a 4K texture like I explained earlier on. So we're going to want to make this 4K by 4K. This should be fine. You don't want to flatten it, and you want to hit OK. Give it some time, let it do its thing. It might take a while. Obviously, the higher the resolution, the more longer it's going to take. So this shouldn't take too long. Okay, it's done, and this is what it looks like. So a texture sheet, what it essentially is if you think about the old animations like Mickey Mouse and stuff like that, it's all drawn frame by frame. This is essentially what it is. This is frame 1, 2, 3, etc., etc. We basically tell the game to load up this image here, and then load up this one, and then this one, and then this one, and then it plays as almost like a little mini movie. But why don't we just import actual movie clips into Unreal? And that's simply because they're super expensive. If you were to tell the engine to play a clip within within milliseconds, right? The average budget for one emitter is like 0.02 milliseconds, which is a lot, really, in real time perspectives. But as it's for games, we gonna need this. Okay, so now that we have this, we can simply do a few adjustments. So we're going to merge all these together to start off with. And first of all, we're going to take this curve editor right here. And what we want is we want an equal amount of black to the white. If you don't quite know what I mean, I basically mean that, say if this smoke here was like super white, right? Like, well, that's red, not white, but let's go like this. So yeah, so say this is a bit blobby like this, and like this, and if we take this into the engine now, and then we were to fade the opacity on this, or use a smooth step node, it will just get rid of all this white all at once. And that's not how smoke works. Smoke dissipates over time. If that doesn't make any sense to you, don't worry about it. But it will one day, I promise. So the best way to do this is we can take a curves editor. sorry, let's go like this. We can just take a point here and ramp up the whites as much as we want, or even bring them down. I think that's what I'm gonna do. And take the blacks and ramp the blacks down a little, maybe the whites up a little. That's looking good to me. Maybe a bit more. Something like that looks good to me. This is actually quite a good start. You don't have to do much editing. So that looks good. There are a few other things that you can do, like contrast maybe, or even the brightness, etc. But we're just going to leave this as it is for now, and just get on with it. I don't want to spend too much time on it. So this is pretty much it. This is a sprite sheet. That's all you have to do. You want to go to File, Save As. Make sure this is a TGA. So just save it in the same folder. We'll call it smoke, and we'll call it T for texture underscore smoke underscore grenade underscore 01. It's good to have a good naming convention. Just good practice. You don't have to, but okay. So here again, we're being asked to select the bit rates. This time I'm just going to go with 24 because we don't actually have an alpha channel. Again, what I mean by this is if you come to here to channels, you'll see here this is red, green, and blue, and we don't have an alpha channel, so we don't need the 32 bits. We only need 24. So this will do just fine. And now it's time to bring it into the Unreal Engine, the most exciting part. So here we are in the Unreal Engine. If you're using Unity, I'm really sorry, but I don't know how to use Unity. Today we're just going to use the Unreal Engine. It's pretty much the same thing. Materials might be set up a bit differently, but the same concept applies. You're going to need to go through all the same steps that we just went through and make a sprite sheet and import it. To do that, if you're new to Unreal Engine, I'm going to try and cover as much as I can, but also trying to be quick. So import, find the location that you saved it in, which was in here. We can sort this by details and do it by date. Get the file that we need. Okay. So here's our texture. Looking very nice. We want to select this to effects. Nope, no we don't. We want to select this one to effects. And everything else is fine. Just gonna leave it as it is for now. It doesn't matter too much. That's more like advanced stuff. So we have our texture in. Now time to make a material. Right click, go to material, name this material M underscore smoke underscore grenade underscore 1. A lot of underscores. Yeah, I'm going to just move this to the side so we can see what we're doing. We're going to bring in this smoke grenade texture, and I'm going to plug it in like so. This is the RGB value. You're going to plug that into the base color, and then you're going to plug the alpha into into opacity. This is grayed out at the moment, and the way to activate this is you're going to tell the engine that you want this material to be translucent, which smoke is. So translucent, and there you go. Now that's activated, and it's in. There it is. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that we didn't actually render an alpha channel. So I'm gonna get rid of this, and I'm just gonna plug it in RGB value. So yeah, there it is. Nice and see-through and all that stuff. And that is it for now. That's pretty simple. I'm going to close that out, make this bigger, and then we're going to go to add new particle system and call this P underscore, let's just call it underscore grenade underscore 1. Open this up. We're going to load in our material into here. So it was this one, And then we're going to drag this into our level, just like so. Now, that's looking a bit weird. That's not what we want. What we want is, we don't want so many to spawn, we just want one to spawn. So this is Cascade. I don't know if you're not too familiar with Cascade. This might go over your head a little bit because it's a lot to take in at first, but it's fairly simple. So this is your viewport. This is what the effect looks like. It's black at the moment. The way to change that is you come up to the top here and you select background color. Just put it on something like gray. There you go. Now you can see it. Also, if you lose your effect and you don't know where it's gone, you can press origin axis here, sorry, and then you should be able to see these like little arrows here, which are quite handy. Okay, so this is your viewport. You can see what's going on in here. Here you have your emitters, and then this is my first emitter. This is by default. You'll have a required, spawn, etc., etc. If you want to add things, you right click, and then here is a whole list of options of things that you can do. I'm not going to go into all of them because there's way too much, but we're just going to go through the essentials to make a flipbook. So we're going to go into required. I'm just going to make this full screen because it's a bit easier. So we're going to start off in required. We're going to scroll down to sub UV. Here we are going to tell the engine that this material has 64 frames that it needs to look at, which is an 8x8 texture. So it's 8 frames across, 8 frames up. So 8 by 8. There you go. Now you can't see anything because it's displaying the very first frame, and the very first frame is blank. So we want to set this to the interpolation mode to linear blend. This is going to play the frames in order from 1 to 64. But again, you can't see anything. So you now need to tell it how to play the sprite. So you right click, you come down to sub UV. You have two options here. For now, we're just going to go with sub UV sub image index, sorry, with this selected. Okay, this is how this works. It's basically like keyframing. So we have a distribution float constant curve. What that means is it's going to take points along its lifetime, and then it's going to set values along those points. For example, the in value is the time of its life. So here you can see there are 2 points, point 0 and point 1. Point 0 is at the value at the very start of its life. It's at 0. Point 1 is at the very end of its life. Is 1. At the end of its life, you want to tell it to be at frame 63. There you go. See, now we're starting to see something. So again, the first keyframe is at frame 0, the start of its life, and it plays at frame 0. Here is at the end of its life, and it plays frame 63. So there's spawning way too many here. So what we want to do is we want to go to spawn. The spawn rate is how many this is spawning per second, I believe. We don't want this to spawn continuously, we just want it to spawn once. So we're going to turn this to 0. And then here in burst is how you tell it to spawn, how many you want it to spawn at once. So we're going to press this little plus sign here to add an element. We're going to tell it how many to spawn here. So we just want it to spawn 1. There you go. Look at that. Little puffer cloud. But it's looking a bit weird. It's flying off. We don't want it to go anywhere. So we have this initial velocity module here. Well, all we're going to do is we're just going to tick it off. So this particle now has 0 velocity, which is good. But it's a bit small, so we want to bump up the size here. So under initial size, here you'll see it's a bit different to the index. So here it's like keyframing, whereas in this one is a distribution vector uniform. There are a few different here that you can see. You can see these ones here. There's about 5. Each are different, but this one sets a minimum and a maximum value. So we want to have a maximum value of about 300 or 400 units. 400 by 400 by 400, and then a minimum value of something like 300 by 300. There you go. There you go. I think it's looking pretty good. We're getting there for sure. Now to stop this from looping over and over and over, we're going to go into the required tab. We're going to scroll down to the to the duration. This is how long the emitter is playing. Don't get this confused with the lifetime of the particle. That's two different things. This one is how long the particle system is playing this emitter. So we're going to turn the loops to 1. So it only loops once and then it's done. You see, now it plays, stops. You can see down here it says completed. So it plays, completed, and it starts again. Okay, so it's looking good, but now what if we want the smoke to hang around for a little bit? What we want to do is we want to go to the lifetime. Here this is set to a min-max distribution float uniform. We are going to change that to a constant, which means it will always be alive for this value. Now FumeFX records its simulations by about 27 frames per second, and if we have 64 frames in our flipbook, that means that each simulation is gonna play for around 2.2 seconds. So we're gonna go into the lifetime, press 2.2. There you go. Now it's looking a lot better. It's hanging around for a bit longer, and it's about the exact same time that we had in our 3ds Max render. It sort of matches it a bit better. Okay, but now, what if I want this to hang around for a bit longer? The best thing to do is to put this to 3 or 4 even. But now you can see that the animation is becoming very choppy. You see, it's like stuttering a little bit. I mean, I can even turn this up more to emphasize this. You see now it's like slow motion, but it's very choppy, and you don't really want that. So what we're going to do, we're going to keep this at 4, but in the image index we're going to now animate these so that it plays the beginning frames really quickly and then slows down its frame rate as the particle's life goes on. So how we're going to do this is we're going to, so you can see here it says 2 array elements. That means that there are 2 keyframes in this life of this particle. We're going to want 4. Okay, so here's 4. So the first key point is at 0. Second key point is at 1, which we want to change. We want to change this one to 0.3. We want to change the next one to 0.5. And the very last one should be 1. We're going to change these values in a second, don't worry about it. But look at this. There's something cool happening now. The explosion happens and it rewinds. This is a pretty great method for some stylize or some crazy effects that your art director might want. It's definitely worth knowing that you're capable of doing something like this, because this looks cool. But that's not what we want for our effect. So now, punching in all these numbers can be a bit of a pain in the ass after a while. So the best way to visualize this is to turn it into a graph. And to turn this into a graph, you come here and you press this little button here. It didn't do anything, but don't worry about it, because it should come up here in the curve editor. Now here in the curve editor, you can, if you don't see anything, you go to fit. And now you can see that there's this line that starts off here, goes up and down. You see, and all the way to 1, which is the end of the particle's life. So we can follow along here. So it goes up and then down and then to the end. So this is a visual representation of what is going on in your effect. So what we're going to do, this is a bit jaggedy, it goes up and down, so we want to smooth this out by pressing Control, Shift and Alt. Then we're going to drag around all of these keyframes. Press Auto Clamp, and you see this smooths it out a little bit better now. So, but we want the last frame for it to be at the end of its animation. So we want to bring this up, bring these, so you can see now. You see? So it starts, plays, goes down and back up. So you can play around with this. The more you play around with it, the more creative you can get, really. So we want it to quickly play the start of its animation and then slowly fades back out. Okay. So it's sort of what we want. We're having, so it lingers around at the very end. But then we get this loop, it loops back for some reason. So let's go back to the details to get a better look at why it's doing this. So the reason why it's doing this is because at the very end of its life, you're telling it to go to frame 76. Frame 76 doesn't exist in our sprite sheet. So we're just gonna have to tell this to go back to frame 63 and stay there. You see, there you go. And go back to the curve, see how this looks. Now, why is it flashing? The reason why it's flashing is because you can see this curve is going up, but then the curve is also coming back down a little. So just make sure you level that out a little bit. A nice level image. And there you go. Now I think it's hanging around a bit too much at the very end there. So we're gonna try and make this a little bit more linear. And again, this is just what it's like. This is just the life of an FX artist. It's just tweaking and moving stuff around and playing with stuff until you get what you want. So this is looking pretty good. It's definitely a good start. But it's the same. It's the same explosion over and over. Obviously, we are a bit limited. We can't simulate these real time in a game. Hopefully one day we can, but not yet. But the way to make this a bit more random is to now come into the required tab. Remember to come back into details, and this is the required tab. So we're going to scroll down, and right here where it says rendering, this is a fancy little trick. If you go into this drop down, what this is going to do is it's now going to flip the texture on its U or V or even both. But what we want to do is we want to flip it along its U. So now this should mirror the image. You see? I'll show you if it does the V. This is what the V does. See, it flips upside down. And now if you do a random one, it will pick between. So sometimes it's that way, sometimes it's that way. And this just helps with your randomization. But obviously we don't want it to go up and down because that's silly. We want it to just go on the U. There you go. So there's a little bit of randomization. It's not a lot. I mean, the player is still going to notice it, but this is all the stuff that we can mask out. So I think that's enough for Cascade for now. I'm going to jump into the material editor now, and then we're going to do some trickery in there. So I'm back in the material editor now. Time to do some wizardry to turn this into something that actually looks nice. Let's just take a look at what it looks like in the game for now. So here's the emitter. It's just laying there doing nothing. You do this by pressing reset, and then that will play it. Just drag it up a bit. Just reset. There you go. So it's yeah, it doesn't look very thick. It just you know, it's just very translucent, very see-through. Looks a bit plain. So we need to do that. We need to figure out how we can do this a bit better. I mean, it's getting there though. So in the material tab, what we're going to do is we need to figure out how to make this thicker. A very good way is to just use a multiply and then drop down a constant value, which is if you hold down 1 on your keyboard and left click, this is going to drop down a 1 value. Plug this into here, plug this into here. What this is going to do, if you don't understand how this works, it's literally going back to how you're taught in school, you know, 2 times 3 is blah blah blah. So this is going to take each pixel value, and then it's going to take that value and then multiply it by this value here. So because it's being multiplied by 0, 0 times 10 is 0, 0 times 15 is 0. So if you need to give this a value higher than 0, let's just go with 0.1. And there you go. You see, this is definitely darker than this one. I want to keep ramping this up. Maybe like a value of 2. Makes this a lot brighter, a lot thicker. But the problem with that is that you can lose a lot of detail, because like I was saying in FumeFX with the lights, it's the same thing. Once you go over a value of 1, you're going to start losing detail, and it's going to start counteracting what you have. So how do we fix that? Well, we can keep using this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a smooth step node. Just type in smooth step, and then you're going to plug in this alpha value into here, and you're going to get rid of these. We don't need these anymore. And then we're going to bring in 2 constant values, 1 and 2. We're going to go into here, and then we're going to add these together to get the maximum value here. So if you press A on your keyboard and left click, that's going to give you an add. Add these 2 together, plug that into maximum. Now this one here, this should be a value of 1. And I can go more into this later on if we have time. But for now, this is how it's going to be. And then plug this into here. Now, what does this look like? What does this actually do? Let me open this. So this is our smoke, and if we change this value, this will basically step from the higher values to the lower values. So it's better to show you. So a value of 0.5 is slowly eroding. The technique is called alpha erosion. So you see, if I animate this, it's like I'm dissipating the smoke, and it's gone. You see? So, but how do we control this in Cascade? How do we animate this? What we need is a particle color, or a dynamic parameter. What do these do? These talk to Cascade. So this is a material editor, and this here is Cascade. And in order for them to talk to each other, we're going to need these. This one is normally used for color, hence particle color. But don't be fooled. This is pretty much the exact same as this. This just carries data the exact same way that this does. You can use these for whatever you want, really. But today we're going to use this one for its own purposes. So we're going to use this for the color. I'm going to put down a multiply, plug that into that, and into that, plug that into base color. So in Cascade, when we now change the color in Cascade, this is going to feed into the multiply, and it's going to multiply it with the white that's in here. And you'll see what I mean later on. Now the same with the dynamic parameter. When we add the dynamic module into Cascade, you'll feed it straight into here, into the smooth step, and then that means you can animate it, which is great. So we're gonna change this name here to mask threshold. This one will be mask softness, and then this one goes into here, and this one goes into here. Get rid of these, we don't need these anymore. And there we go. Well, what's happened to our texture? I don't understand. Where's it gone? Well, that is because the dynamic parameter, the default values here, are set to 1, 1, 1, 1. And in order for the smooth step to see the texture, the mask threshold needs to be a value of 0. And there you go. There it is. It's back. Okay, so we're going to apply this. Oh, sorry. Before we go, we need to add these two together to get our maximum value. So we're going to add these two values to get our maximum, and then that should look quite nice. Okay, so now we're going to apply. We're going to come over to Cascade and wait for this to load, and it's not there. Well, it's not there because we need to go into, right click, open up parameter, dynamic, and then always remember that you need to right click dynamic parameter to refresh the module before using it. That is because when you refresh it, you can then see these names here that you put in the material editor. Now this threshold, like I said, it needs to be 0 for you to see it, and there it is. The softness controls, well, it controls the softness. I guess I could just show you. So you see, so it's yeah, it's a hard edge essentially, and as I lower it, or as I lower it down, you see it gets hard, like a harder edge. It's not very nice, but for some effects it might be exactly what you need. But we're just going to keep this at 0 for now. 1, sorry, we're going to keep this at 1. So this is what we want to animate. We want to animate the mask threshold, and to do this we want to change this from a constant to a constant curve. Open up this drop down menu, put in 2 keyframes. The first keyframe will be playing at 0. The last keyframe will be playing at the end of its life, and we want to go from 0 to 1. You see how it disappears over time? That's looking very nice. I think it's disappearing a bit too quick though now. So what we want to do is we want to take the out value here, bring this up to, we want to take the in value and bring this to 0.5. So what I'm saying is after halfway through the life of the particle, then you start to bring the value up to 1. You see? So halfway through the particle, which is about now, it dissipates the smoke. Okay, it's looking a lot better now. How does it look in engine? Oh, it looks alright. It's still a bit thin. So what we need to do, we're going to need to multiply this by the alpha of the color of the particle color node. So I'm going to bring in another multiply, bring that in, and bring this result into here. So what I'm doing is I'm now multiplying the value that we're going to set in Cascade with the end result of the alpha erosion technique here. Apply that, head into Cascade, wait for it to load. Come into here and color over life. And now you'll be able to, you'll have 2 options here. You'll be able to affect the color and the alpha. We're just going to affect the alpha, and we're going to double this up, or maybe 0.5. It's looking kind of ugly. Let's see how it looks in here. There you go. See? So if it looks kind of ugly in here, always make sure you look at what it looks like in engine, because the lighting might be different, etc., etc. So this is in here now. It's looking alright, looking good. Normally you add like a normal map and all sorts of other fun stuff to it to make it look a bit better. Now you see, if I keep playing this, you'll see there's a hard line here where it's intersecting with other geometry. The way that we can fix that is by adding a depth fade. So if I just move these along, add in another multiply like so, and right click, type in depth, and just plug in this depth fade. What does this do? Simply, when this particle intersects with any opaque geometry, opaque meaning you can't see through it, it's completely solid. When it does that, it's then going to fade the alpha where that is intersecting. So you can't really see it in here, but in here you should be able to see it. So we still have that hard. Oh, I don't think we applied it. Applied. There you go, wait for it to load. There you go, much nicer, look at that. Okay, it's looking pretty good. What if we want to change the color? So if we want to change the color, we're going to come into color over life here. And then instead of changing the alpha, we're going to change the color here. So this is at the start of its life, it's going to be white, and at the end of its life, it's going to be white. So what if we want it to be a bit darker, like so? Let's give it a red look too. There you go. Red, and then maybe a little bit brighter, coming into white. Okay, how does this look? Whoa, it looks nasty. Looks a bit ugly. Let's just keep it to gray, maybe. This is how it works essentially, right? So you can change these colors. Have it blue if you like. Have all kinds of colors. If you're making something like poison smoke, this is how you do it. It's fairly simple. Darken these. Something like that looks good. Maybe lighten this up as it goes over its life. Darken it. Keep it like so. I think it looks good. Still looking a bit thin. How can we better this? Well, one of the things that we can do is we can come into Photoshop, come back into our layers, and then we can take the brightness, brighten this up a little, just a tad. So you see here it's got a value of 15. I think that's almost more than enough to do what we want it to do. Save as, save over the file, DGA, blah blah blah. There you go, replace. Cool. Back into Unreal. To reload that texture in, find the texture in your content browser, which should be right here, and then you just click re-import. Wait for it to load. Simple as that. It's a little bit brighter. How does this look now? Much better. But now we're getting these solid values. What I mean by solid is it's like if I press Control R, that will freeze the game, and you can see that these, like, it's a harsh value here, and it doesn't look that great. So we're going to try and get rid of that. And we're going to bring this back down to 1, and there we go. I think that's looking pretty good. Okay, well, that's pretty much it. That's how you make a smoke grenade, right? Okay, so we're gonna add a bit of fire to this. Give it a bit more of a threatening look, more of a grenading look. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna rearrange a few of this to better suit our needs. Essentially, what we want to do is we want to add in a value into this emissive color, and if we do this and add this a value of 1, or maybe even a value of 10, we can see what this looks like. You see it's a really bright look. This isn't what we want, because obviously, I mean, well, it doesn't look right. So we're gonna reroute a few of these. Now, like I was saying earlier, these two are basically, they output the same kind of values. It's just a value of whatever you decide to assign in Cascade. It means that you can basically use these for your own will. I'm just going to start again, essentially. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. I'm now going to control the alpha erosion with the alpha settings here by going add, plug that into that, plug that into that. This can be set to 1. Okay, here we have our, this is going to be the output of the alpha. This needs to go into here. But now to add. Now we have all these slots available, you see. So we've utilized this extra one to do what this did here, but now we have extras, which means we can do some more fun stuff. So you want to take this, the output of this, and then bring it into multiply. Plug that into that. And you want to plug this into a black body. What the black body node does is basically a Kelvin scale. It takes a temperature value in Kelvin, and then it outputs a color value. You can look up more. You can look up black body temperature values on Google, and it will come up with a more scientific explanation. But I'm not a scientist, so I can't really tell you exactly how it goes. But now we're going to multiply it again. Plug that into the emissive value. Plug this into here. Now we've got to change the name on these and call this temperature, and this one intense for intensity. There we go. So what's going on? Basically, we're figuring out what the smoke looks like, the silhouette of the smoke, using alpha erosion here, being controlled by the particle color node that speaks to Cascade. And then once you have the silhouette, you want to also make it look like fire, right? So we want to turn it into the emissive color. So here we're going to set the temperature value here, the temperature, and then the intensity. Apply this, head into here. Not here, sorry, close this out. We have to refresh this again to change this. And now we're going to have a constant value of about 2000, and have a color value of, now because we changed this so that the color over life, the alpha now controls the alpha erosion. We're going to need this to be 0, and at 0.5 we want it to fade. There you go, you see, now we've got this fiery look. Up this to 100. There you go. That's looking a bit better. But now what if we only want this fire to be at the first few frames? What we have to do is we have to add in another smooth step node to animate that. A lot of smooth step nodes. Once you have this done, it's all worth it. Take this into here. Plug this into there. Get a value of 1. Do the exact same thing. Get an add these two, and that goes into your max, and then this one also goes into your minimum. So this one now becomes your fire threshold. Okay, this needs to be a value of 1. And remember, that is how soft the mask is. It's the same thing here. This is how soft. This is how soft the masks are. Okay, it should work. I mean, it looks a bit messy, but yeah, it'll do. We know what's going on, so it's okay. Well, I hope you know what's going on. I'm going to apply that. Look into here. And again, we need to refresh this dynamic in order to get these values. Right, so if you can remember the threshold, if it's set to 1, there's going to be nothing showing. But if it's set to 0, there's going to be something. Okay? So we need to animate this from 0 to 1, but in 2 keyframes. Put the last keyframe at the end of its life, and put the value of the first keyframe to 0, and then the value of the last keyframe to 1. Look at that. Now we're getting somewhere. Now it's burning out a bit too long. It's taking too long to burn away. So we're going to lower this down. Maybe even more, down to 0.2. There you go. That's looking good, I think. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just increase the intensity of this fire by a bit more. 300 maybe. Here you go. Okay, that's how you take a look at slow motion. So here in time, you can drop this down, animation speed, 1%. And you can view it at a much slower rate. A much slower rate. But that's looking good. I think that's fine for now. Just for the tutorial's sake, let's take a look at what it looks like in game. And there you go. You have a pretty decent explosion for now. And there you go. Think it's looking pretty good. Now there's a lot more that you can do to this, obviously. A lot more detail that you can add. But for now, I think that's good enough. If you want to, you can add the side bits. You know, like smoke coming out from the side and swirling around. It's just a case of coming back into here and re-angling the particles and rendering them out. But yeah, so it shouldn't be too hard. Okay, well that concludes the tutorial. Please give me feedback. This is the first tutorial that I've done. I'm hoping to do more. It'd be great if you could ask what you need to see. It'll definitely help out what I need to do. Thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.